When a dog has nice loose leash walking where they're not pulling on the end of the leash, we can start introducing the heel position and teach them to walk by our side and not creep ahead. So in the prior lesson, we were working on doing some 180s so that the dog would know to avoid the end of the leash. And we've been rewarding the dog in heel position. The dog has some kind of concept that that's a good place to be, and maybe they like to go there, but they don't stay there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to teach the dog that that's the place to be. It's not just a cool place to be sometimes when you want an extra snack. It is the place to walk. There are a few reasons to insist on heel position walking. One, it looks really good. If you're out in the world and people see the dog walking really nicely next to you, then they're going to compliment you and you're going to feel competent. It looks good, it feels good. Another reason is it opens up a lot of other things you can do with this dog. Since you're adding in a higher expectation and more structure, when you walk that dog with other dogs or let them off leash, it's a lot more likely to go well. They're more likely to walk nicely with the other dogs, not be reactive, and listen well off leash. What a lot of dog owners and professionals do is they have the dog in heel position and the leash is tight. We don't want that. We want the dog walking in heel position in a loose leash. When we're doing our interventions to teach the dog to stay in the heel position, it's important that the leash is the right length. It should be short enough that you can use pressure on the leash quickly before the dog creeps out too far ahead of heel position. But don't make it too short. The leash should be slack when you walk along in heel position. It's so important that you keep your leash short because if you give the dog the whole leash or even a foot of leash too much, they're going to get past that spot really quickly before you can intervene, and then it's more difficult to communicate the line you want them to be aware of. You need to have a really keen awareness of where your knees are, where your legs are, and where you want the heeling boundary to be. You must know in your mind where is the boundary for heel position walking. You want to be aware of your dog side knee when it's in front. So when you're walking along and the knee that's on the same side as the dog is in front, that's the boundary for heel position. It's about 8 inches in front of your hips. The knee is also the visual context for the dog, what they're going to be tracking in their peripheral vision when they're in heel position. This is the line that the dog shall not pass, so you have to have that in your mind all the time. Start introducing the line to the dog with the pop and walk technique. You're going to walk along, and when that leg that's on the dog side is forward, the knee is forward, you do a pop on the leash to mark that boundary. And you keep stepping and popping. Pop and walk, pop and walk, pop and walk. The pop should be crisp and clean, marking the spot, not pulling the dog back. You want the pop to be slightly annoying to the dog so they notice it, and this is just to introduce the boundary to the dog. We don't want to walk along like this forever because the dog will eventually tune it out and get desensitized to the leash. Pop and walk also helps you feel out the length of the leash that you need. If you're doing pop and walk and the dog gets ahead of the boundary of your front dog side knee, then the leash is too long. That's going to tell you that you need to shorten your leash. So it's a really good exercise to get the mechanics down, build your awareness of the boundary line, and build the dog's awareness of the boundary line. Consider your walking pace when doing this technique. If you're walking rapidly and doing pop and walk, the dog doesn't really have time to think and process that this is a significant boundary because it's gone so fast so many times. So you don't want to walk too fast. You also don't want to walk too slow. You don't want to be inching along because the dog can get distracted and bored. So walk at a medium-low pace. If the dog is volunteering walking in the heel position, hanging back a little bit from the boundary line, reward that heavily. Especially in this learning phase, if they're in the heel position, be sure to feed them there. They're trying to figure out what's the right thing to do, and if you give lots of feedback for doing the thing you want them to do, that helps them figure it out. When the dog has an awareness of the boundary line, you can start testing their understanding of it and enforcing it as a rule. For testing if the dog gets the concept that that's where you want them to be, you'll slow down your pace or stop walking, see what they do, and then give them feedback based on what they did. Walk at a medium slow pace, and when your dog's side leg is in front, stop or significantly slow your walking. If the dog pauses or slows down, if they respect the heel position boundary, say good and feed them. If the dog goes ahead and touches the heel position boundary, say ah and do a pop on the leash at the boundary line. You're testing them by stopping walking and then intervening and communicating with them if they made the right choice, if they were paying attention to you and paused, or if they weren't paying attention to you and continued forward. The order of operations is important here, as always. You need to say ah just before they get to the boundary line, and they may slow down just from that verbal communication. That's ideal. If they don't yield to your verbal communication, you need to mark the boundary line with a pop on the leash. If you mishmash the verbal communication with the leash pop, the dog won't learn that ah is a warning, which makes it a lot less useful. Also, keep in mind that the length of your leash is really important here because you need to be able to mark the physical position of the boundary line. It's not just timing, it's also the physical position of where your knee is relative to their body. If you stop at this lesson, you're mostly going to end up walking with dogs who walk along and catch the leash, walk along and catch the leash, walk along and catch the leash. So practice these concepts with your dogs and get yourself prepped with the physical habits of the boundary line, the length of the leash, and introduce the heel position. And then next week, we're going to get into the bread and butter of heel position walking.
If this video helped you, please like and subscribe. Share it with other dog walkers. Also, check out our Patreon where you can sign up for even more course materials and plug in to a supportive community of skilled professional dog walkers and Canine Cred fans.